Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I'd film more of a chatty, reflective video based on my experiences during the first few weeks of my PGCE year. From the first video I created, I seemed to have a lot of positive comments about it being quite helpful to people starting, so hopefully this will act as another video that will help you, if that's emotionally or with some advice, whatever that may be, during your first term or first few weeks, first few months of your PGCE year. So if you haven't started already, you will have an enrolment day, an induction day, blah, 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 blah. You'll already know this, you've done a degree, you know what that entails. What I am going to talk to you about is what I experienced at BCU, and this might be similar for what you're experiencing, but always be mindful that it depends on the institute and obviously the course. So for my course, for the first 2 weeks, I knew that I was going to be in uni and I was going to be having lectures. And then as soon as those 2 weeks were over, we were in school. But in those 2 weeks, what our lecturers provided us with was a series of different lectures on different areas of teaching as a whole. What I will say, and to kind of give you a bit of reassurance, is that you might feel really overwhelmed with the amount of information that you're being given, or you might be sitting there going, I don't understand what this means, or thinking, how am I ever going to be able to apply this? Don't worry, it is a lot of information, but what they're trying to do is, because your year is going to be so jam-packed full, they're trying to give you all the information at first just to be mindful and aware of. However, they know, and they might tell you, some of my lecturers said that it's a lot of the information they're telling you, you won't fully understand until you get into the classroom. So obviously, you know, make your notes, be listening, make sure you're attending all of those lectures because they are very, very useful. But be mindful at the same time that, for instance, differentiation and challenge, support, SEN needs, anything like that, that you're not going to be able to fully understand or obviously apply until you're in the classroom. This seems like an obvious thing to say, but it's just to kind of remind you, don't feel worn down by it and don't feel worried about it, because your time will come, you will have time to practice this. As well, what I experienced in those first few weeks was that we had a subject focus after every lecture, that basically our tutors, so our subject tutors, basically applied the area that we'd learnt about in the lecture towards our subject. So as a trainee, I was then placed from being with everybody who was doing a PGCE secondary course and then divided amongst subject groups. Phone, can you not? Based on my subject area. So obviously mine was drama. And this was really, really useful because they were then able to apply the area within this subject. And I'd say definitely for secondary, and it will probably most likely be the same for primary, depending on the subject and also depending on the age group you're teaching, will definitely have an effect on different things you're trying to apply in the classroom. And being able to have a tutor who's able to kind of give you examples that might be literally, what I experienced a lot of was the teacher, our tutor acting as a teacher and we placing ourselves from the pupils' perspectives. So it was almost like we were able to take part in the lesson as a pupil would, but then have that time to reflect and think, oh wow, that's a really interesting way to use differentiation. Wow, that's a really interesting need, really interesting way to suit SEN needs or individual needs. Wow, that's a really interesting way to apply literacy within the classroom. And those 2 weeks, so you'll have a combination of lectures and subject focus, are just going to give you a little bit of an introduction and a taster of how to apply the different areas of teaching depending upon your subject specialism or your age range, depending if it's primary or secondary. So that's kind of what you should expect from the first. This might be, for instance, this was 2 weeks for me. It might be, I don't know, it might be 6-7 weeks you're in uni and then you're out in school. It might be less, but that's what it was for me. And then eventually you will be given your school. If you aren't school direct, you'll obviously be, if you are school direct, sorry, you'll already know your school, but if you're not, your tutors will be trying to arrange in those first few weeks where you'll have your first placement. And they do take stuff into consideration like your location and whether you can drive or not, so don't worry about those things. But what they're trying to do is provide you with places and schools that you're going to benefit from, as in what I experienced was 2 very different schools, and both were really, really good schools, but I learned different things from each of them. And also just be mindful of, don't worry if all of a sudden your tutor turns around and says, I'm going to have to try and rearrange your placement. This is just sometimes down to the school, that there might be external factors or a situation that they can't take a trainee, so don't feel like it's a personal insult, and don't worry, it's not like this happened to anybody I trained with or went to BCU with will 100% agree with me. It's not personal and it does happen, but I promise you your tutor will get somewhere sorted out for you, and it won't just be, oh, let's push that person into there because we've got nowhere else. It will be well thought through, well planned through. And then you'll end up in school. And what I experienced within the first few weeks of being in school was it's a lot of observation. So what I would advise for anybody going into school is obviously observe, but more importantly, I would make sure you've got a notepad and pen, and don't feel the need to literally sit there and just write for the whole time. But maybe what I would probably recommend actually is that a heads up, you will be, and I'll do another video on this, but you will be marked against the teacher standards. So what I potentially might do is write the list of teacher standards in your notepad, or have that somewhere for you, and possibly while you're observing, think about where the teacher standards are being used and different ideas you can take away, because teaching in general, you will always be using the teacher standards. So that's what I would be doing whilst I'm observing. What I'd also do actually is in those first few weeks when you're not teaching, because that's another heads up, you won't be expected in the first week of you going into a school to be teaching, I don't know, 10 hours worth. I highly doubt no institution will have that rule. And it all depends on then the school you're going to. They might say after the first or second week, why don't you teach a lesson or two? Or it might be they just say for the first 3-4 weeks just focusing on observing. It all depends. But whilst you're just observing, I would obviously make notes. But what I'd also do is try and see what school you're at. Try and go into as many different classrooms as you can, even if you don't teach that subject necessarily. It's just more for you to get a grips of how different teachers approach things. And I'll be honest with you here, as an NQT, what I learnt last year and what I'm learning now is that there isn't a right or wrong way of the approach towards teaching. There's obviously more effective ways, but a lot of it comes down to practice, personal preference, and what works for the kids you've got in front of you. So that's why it helps to just kind of dip into other people's classrooms and just think, oh wow, I'm going to try out that behavioural management. Oh wow, I'm going to try that resource they've created. Just so it gives you a wide range of knowledge, and you'll probably be doing this throughout your teaching career anyway, just popping in. What else? So what I experienced, just to kind of start to round this off, is that I didn't actually start a teaching timetable until after the October half term. So this again is normal, depends on the institute, depends on the school. So you will have time to prepare things, prepare schemes of work, prepare lesson plans. But what I would suggest, and if you haven't checked out my first video, I would check that out, because this is kind of a repeat thing. But I would be looking, as soon as you know, as soon as you'll have a mentor with you as well in school. Sorry, I probably haven't mentioned that. You will have a mentor with you in school, and they will be telling you kind of what you will be teaching, to just have a look on teaching websites, Facebook pages, to kind of just have a look at some ideas, some resources that might help you, because you will get to a point that you feel very overwhelmed. Depending on the person and how you cope with this is a different thing entirely. But what I would do, if I could go back now, that's 100% one thing I would be doing. I would be looking at different people's schemes of work or lesson plans in your school, or even just, like I said, online, just so when the first time you come to plan something is the hardest, I promise you. So in those first few weeks, you might just be observing, but consider that you probably will be asked to start creating schemes or creating lessons after the October half term. And the last kind of bit of advice I'll give you on what to expect in your first few weeks is that 3 things actually. So your university tutors are there 100% to support you, 100% to help you, but always be mindful that they will obviously have other things to prepare, and they'll have other pupils, so other trainees. So just give them time to kind of respond in that. But don't feel afraid to ask them questions, because that's what they're there for. 2, get to know your mentor at school. So your mentor will be the person who will be overseeing you whilst in the school. Get to know them, get to know some important dates. And lastly, the one thing I'd recommend overall in the first few weeks is try and get yourself into a routine. Don't leave things till last minute. If that's lesson plans, schemes, because you don't want to get to that first half term where you've got a week break off and you feel like, oh my gosh, I've got 5 schemes, I've got 5 schemes to plan, and I've got 4 different year groups to plan for, or 4 different subjects. I've got no idea what I'm doing. Start to divide up your time now, because oh my gosh, that will help you, and you need to give yourself a break in those first few weeks, because you will feel probably overwhelmed with information and time. So that's and that probably, for a lot of you, there's still a lot of questions that you're probably wondering about. So if there's anything specific that you want to know more about in regards to what to expect later on in your PGCE year, or something I maybe haven't answered for you, please leave a comment below and like the video, just to let me know that it's been useful for you. I am planning to continue to create these videos, and what I'm trying to do as well is schedule them for appropriate times to when you'll be experiencing things. I don't want to kind of blab or say too much of what to expect later on in the year, just because what you want to do is you want to focus on things in short amounts. So yeah, this might have been a rambly video, and you might be more confused now than you were before, but stay tuned. I am trying to create these once a week or once every 2 weeks, but I am a teacher, so some weeks might be busier than others, and I'm going to try and upload these on a Sunday. But again, thank you very much for watching my video. Please subscribe so you just get these on a regular occurrence whenever I upload. And thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.